Hello, and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, and I'll be your narrator tonight. Let's take a moment to step away from the busy world around us, leaving the rush behind as we ease into a peaceful place full of dreams and wonder. Tonight, we have a special story to share, a tale about King Magnifico, a ruler who had the extraordinary gift of granting wishes and spreading happiness across his kingdom. But even in a place as magical as Solaria, not everything is as perfect as it seems. As we follow the king's journey, we'll uncover lessons of balance, kindness, and the real magic that lives within us all. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from, and what time is it as you settle in for tonight's story? I also want to know what kinds of stories you enjoy most. Your thoughts and suggestions help shape the stories we share, so feel free to drop them in the comments below. If you're looking for even more, you can check out our Patreon for early access to all our stories, plus a curated playlist on Spotify to guide you to relaxation. One more quick thing. I wanted to let you know that only 5.5% of our viewers are subscribed to the channel. That means 94.5% of you haven't subscribed to us yet. If you've been enjoying these bedtime stories, subscribing is a quick and free way to support us. Once we hit 1,000 subscribers, we'll be able to remove all mid-roll ads, giving you a smoother and completely uninterrupted listening experience. Your support truly means the world to us, and together, we can make TerraNash an even more peaceful place to unwind and enjoy stories. Now, let's take a moment to relax. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the world around you fade away. Feel the soft weight of your body sinking into your bed, and let the rhythm of your breath bring you to a peaceful, calm place. Let the story flow over you like a gentle stream, carrying you to a world of tranquility and dreams. As you listen, feel the warmth of hope and calm wrap around you, soothing your mind and preparing you for a peaceful night's sleep. You are safe here, and all you need to do is relax and let the story unfold. Tonight, we'll journey to a faraway kingdom, a land of golden light, magic, and dreams that softly whisper through the night. And with that, the story begins. Chapter 1: The King's Gift. The kingdom of Solaria was a place of quiet beauty. Rolling green hills stretched endlessly, dotted with wildflowers that danced in the breeze. Rivers as clear as glass wove through the valleys, their gentle babble a constant melody that soothed all who heard it. At the heart of this tranquil realm stood the palace of King Magnifico, a towering structure of white stone that shimmered under the sunlight like a beacon of hope. King Magnifico was beloved not for his wealth or power, but for his gift, the ability to grant a single selfless wish to anyone who came before him. This was no ordinary magic, for it required the wish to come from a place of pure intent, untainted by greed or malice. The king had an extraordinary ability to look into the hearts of his petitioners and see their true desires. If the wish passed this silent test, he would raise his hand, whisper ancient words, and the wish would become reality. Word of his gift spread far beyond the borders of Solaria. Pilgrims traveled for weeks, braving treacherous roads and fierce storms, just for the chance to stand before the king. They arrived with wishes that were small but meaningful. A widow asking for her child's health to return, a farmer wishing for rain to save his dying crops, a young woman yearning to reunite with her lost sister. Magnifico never asked for payment, only that their wishes be true. Despite the joy he gave, Magnifico carried a quiet sadness in his heart. His magic came with a single, unbreakable rule. He could not grant wishes for himself. This rule weighed heavily on him, especially in the solitude of his chambers, where no one could see the melancholy in his eyes. Though surrounded by love and gratitude, he felt the pangs of longing for something he couldn't name, something he dared not wish for. One day, as Magnifico gazed out of the great windows of his throne room, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he whispered to himself, "How can I give joy to so many and feel so little of it for myself?" The words faded into the stillness, unanswered, as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky. Chapter 2. A Mysterious Visitor. The night was unusually quiet when the visitor arrived. A thick fog had rolled into the kingdom, cloaking the palace grounds in an ethereal haze. The guards at the gates saw nothing, yet when they turned back to face the courtyard, a hooded figure stood silently before them. She was draped in a dark cloak that shimmered faintly, as if woven from starlight. Her presence was unnerving, but not threatening, and without a word, the guards stepped aside, compelled by a force they couldn't understand. Magnifico was in his study, lost in thought, when the figure appeared before him, as if from the shadows themselves. Startled, the king rose from his chair. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady despite his surprise. The stranger lowered her hood, revealing a face that seemed both young and ancient, with eyes that glimmered like molten silver. "I am but a messenger," she said, her voice soft yet resonant. "I bring a warning, King Magnifico." The king frowned, unsettled but curious. "What kind of warning?" The stranger stepped closer, her gaze piercing. "Your power is a gift, yes, but all gifts have a cost. Do not forget this, for the price of your magic may one day become more than you are willing to pay." Magnifico stiffened at her words. "My magic serves the people. It has done nothing but bring light to this kingdom." The woman tilted her head, a hint of sorrow in her expression. "For now, perhaps, but the heart of magic is balance. Take heed, King. Even light casts shadows." Before Magnifico could respond, the stranger stepped back into the fog. He called out to her, demanding answers, but her form dissolved into the mist, leaving him alone with her cryptic words. That night, the king sat by the window, staring at the moon as it cast its pale glow over the land. Her warning echoed in his mind, a troubling refrain that refused to be silenced. What price could there be for a gift that brought only good? And why did her words feel so heavy, as if they carried the weight of a truth he could not yet see? Magnifico did not sleep that night, his heart restless with questions that had no answers. Chapter 3. The Forbidden Wish. The days after the stranger's warning passed uneventfully, but her words lingered in King Magnifico's thoughts. He found himself staring longer at the Heart of Light, the ancient gem that pulsed softly at the center of the grand hall. It was a marvel of magic, encased in an intricate pedestal of gold and silver, its glow a gentle reminder of the power he wielded. Yet now, that glow seemed to taunt him, reminding him of the one rule he could not break. The Heart of Light had been in the royal family for generations, its origins shrouded in mystery. Legends claimed it was a fragment of a star, gifted to the first king by the celestial beings who watched over the realm. Its power had always been a force for good, granting the ruler the ability to turn pure wishes into reality. But the legends also spoke of a balance, a warning that the heart's power was not infinite and should never be used for selfish desires. Magnifico had lived by this rule all his life, yet the stranger's warning stirred something within him. He began to wonder why the heart's power came with such restrictions. Was it truly selfish to want joy for himself, the same joy he had given so freely to others? The thought grew like a seed planted in fertile soil, its roots spreading deeper with each passing day. One evening, as the palace lay still and the stars glittered above, Magnifico found himself standing before the Heart of Light. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the gem's glow. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from its surface. For the first time, he felt its warmth radiating through him, not as a distant energy, but as something alive, something aware. "You've spent your life serving others," he whispered to himself. "Surely one wish for my own heart cannot undo all the good I've done." The moment the words left his lips, the heart seemed to respond, its light intensifying as if urging him onward. Trembling, Magnifico placed his hands on the gem. It pulsed under his touch, and a soft voice, neither male nor female, filled the room. "Your wish shall be granted," it said, its tone soothing yet heavy with warning. "But remember, all light casts a shadow. Are you certain this is what you desire?" Magnifico hesitated, his heart pounding. Yet the ache of his loneliness outweighed his fear. "I wish to feel the love and happiness I have given to my people," he said. The heart glowed brighter, its warmth enveloping him like an embrace. Magnifico felt a surge of emotion, a profound, overwhelming joy that brought tears to his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt truly whole, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He stepped back, breathing deeply, and the heart's light dimmed to its usual soft glow. In that moment, Magnifico believed he had made the right choice, but in the depths of his mind, a faint unease stirred, a shadow creeping at the edges of his newfound happiness. Chapter 4. The Heart's Whisper. At first, the change seemed to bring nothing but good. Magnifico felt lighter, more at peace. and his laughter rang through the palace halls like music. The people noticed the difference in their king and rejoiced, believing his happiness was a reflection of the kingdom's prosperity. Requests for wishes continued, and Magnifico granted them with a newfound vigor, his magic weaving miracles with ease. But soon, subtle cracks began to appear. The wishes he granted no longer brought the same unblemished joy. A young man who wished for the courage to propose to his love found himself plagued by crippling self-doubt the next day. A mother who wished for her child's illness to be cured discovered the child now suffered from restless nightmares. These misfortunes were small at first, easily dismissed as coincidence, but they grew steadily worse. Magnifico began to notice a strange fatigue after each wish, as if the magic drained not just from the heart, but from his very being. At night, his once peaceful dreams turned into vivid, disjointed visions. He saw shadows creeping through the palace, whispers echoing in the halls, and a cold, hollow sensation that left him waking in a sweat. One night, as he stood alone in the grand hall, gazing at the heart, he heard it speak again. The voice was no longer soothing, but sharp, almost accusatory. "You have taken from the light," it said, the words echoing in his mind. "The balance is broken." Magnifico stepped back, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" he demanded. But the heart did not answer. Its glow flickered, dimmer than he had ever seen it. For the first time, he noticed faint cracks forming along its surface, lines of darkness spreading like veins. Fear gripped him. The heart had always been a source of peace and stability, but now it felt like a ticking clock, counting down to an unknown calamity. He thought back to the stranger's warning. Even light casts shadows. Magnifico began to realize the depth of his mistake. In seeking happiness for himself, he had upset the delicate balance that sustained the magic. The wishes he granted were no longer pure, their outcomes tainted by the shadow he had brought into the heart. He could feel it now, a darkness that clung to him, growing stronger with each passing day. Determined to set things right, Magnifico resolved to find the hooded stranger once more. She had warned him of this danger, and perhaps she held the key to undoing it. As he left the hall, the flickering light of the heart followed him like a silent plea, a reminder of the price he had yet to pay. Chapter 5. The Change Within. At first, King Magnifico believed he could manage the subtle changes in his magic. He convinced himself that the mishaps with the wishes were minor, a coincidence, or simply the unpredictability of life. But the unease in his heart grew stronger with each passing day. Where once his magic had been effortless, it now left him drained, as though each wish cost him a part of himself. The fatigue began to creep into other aspects of his life. His morning walks through the palace gardens, once his favorite escape, now felt burdensome. He could no longer enjoy the vibrant roses or the sweet chirping of sparrows. The colors seemed dimmer, the melodies duller. Even the laughter of children in the courtyard, a sound that once lifted his spirits, felt distant and hollow. The dreams were the worst of all. Every night, Magnifico found himself in an endless maze of shadowy corridors, the walls lined with flickering mirrors that reflected distorted images of himself. Some versions of him wore expressions of pain. Others had eyes filled with malice. At the center of the maze was the heart of light. But in these dreams, it no longer glowed. Instead, it pulsed with a dark crimson light, and each pulse sent a wave of dread through him. One morning, as he sat at breakfast with his advisors, he noticed the way they looked at him. Their eyes, once filled with admiration, now carried a flicker of concern. "Your Majesty," one of them finally said, hesitant but earnest, "you've seemed different as of late. Are you well?" Magnifico forced a smile. "I am fine," he replied, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. "Merely tired. The work of a king is never done." But deep down, he knew it wasn't the work that wore him down. It was the magic, the weight of the imbalance he had created. That day, as he walked through the town square, he noticed something strange. The once lively marketplace was quieter, the laughter of merchants and customers subdued. A woman approached him, her face pale and anxious. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing low. "The wish you granted me last week. It was for my husband to return safely from war. He did, but..." She hesitated, tears welling in her eyes. "He is not the same. He speaks of shadows and hears voices no one else can hear." Magnifico reassured her as best he could, but her words haunted him. He began to see similar patterns in the other wishes he had granted. A farmer who wished for fertile soil found his fields overrun with weeds. A child who wished for courage became reckless, putting himself in danger. The once happy stories that had defined his reign were unraveling, replaced by fear and sorrow. The realization was undeniable. His magic was no longer pure. It had been tainted, and with it, so had the lives of those he sought to help. Chapter 6. A Kingdom in Peril. As the weeks passed, the shadow over the kingdom grew darker. The once thriving fields began to wither, even under the brightest sun. Rivers that had always run clear now carried a murky hue, and the air, once filled with the scent of wildflowers, carried a faint bitterness. The people grew restless, their faith in Magnifico wavering. Whispers began to spread through the villages and towns. Rumors that the king's magic had turned against him, that he was no longer the benevolent wish-granter they had once adored. Magnifico withdrew from public life, retreating to the solitude of his chambers. He spent hours pacing, his mind racing for answers. The heart of light continued to dim, its cracks growing deeper, and with each passing day, its glow felt less like a beacon and more like a warning. One night, as he sat by the window overlooking the silent city, he noticed a faint figure moving through the mist below. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but as the figure drew closer, he recognized her unmistakable silhouette. The hooded stranger had returned. Magnifico hurried down to the palace garden, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. She stood waiting for him beneath the ancient oak tree, her cloak shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Her face was shadowed, but her presence was as commanding as before. "You've come back," he said, his voice heavy with desperation. Please, you warned me before, but I didn't listen. Tell me, how can I fix this? How can I save my kingdom?" The stranger studied him in silence for a moment before speaking. "You have taken what was not yours to take," she said. "The balance of the heart is fragile, and you have upset it. The light you drew for yourself has cast a shadow over the land." "I didn't know," Magnifico pleaded. "I only wanted to feel the joy I've given to others. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Intent does not erase consequence," she replied. Her tone was neither harsh nor kind, but resolute. The heart cannot heal itself while you hold on to what you have taken. If you wish to restore the balance, you must make a choice. Relinquish the joy you sought and all the magic you possess, or let the shadow consume everything. The weight of her words struck him like a blow. The thought of losing his magic was unbearable. It had been a part of him for so long, a source of purpose and identity. Yet the thought of letting his kingdom fall deeper into ruin was far worse. "Is there no other way?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The stranger shook her head. "Magic demands sacrifice. You must decide what you are willing to give." With that, she turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving Magnifico alone once more. He stood there for a long time, the weight of his choice pressing down on him like a storm cloud. For the first time in his life, the path forward was not clear, and the king who had always been a symbol of hope now felt utterly lost. Chapter 7. The Cost of Sacrifice. The words of the hooded stranger haunted Magnifico as he wandered the empty halls of his palace. Her warning rang in his mind like a tolling bell. You must decide what you are willing to give. The thought of surrendering his magic, the very gift that defined him, filled him with dread. Yet the growing shadow over his kingdom left him with little choice. In the days that followed, Magnifico sought counsel from the heart of light, standing before it in the solitude of the grand hall. The gem's once brilliant glow had dimmed to a faint shimmer, and the cracks that marred its surface seemed deeper now, like jagged scars. Magnifico placed his hands upon it, hoping it would guide him, as it had so many times before. "What must I do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "How do I restore what I've broken?" For the first time, the heart's voice was faint, as though it, too, was weakened by the imbalance. "Return what you have taken," it said, its tone heavy with sadness. "But know this, the magic cannot be undone without a sacrifice." Magnifico closed his eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had always believed his gift was a blessing, a force of unyielding good. But now, he saw it for what it truly was, a responsibility that required not just selflessness, but an unwavering strength of will. He had faltered, and his people had paid the price. That night, he summoned his council of advisors to the great hall. They entered cautiously, their faces etched with worry. Magnifico stood before them, his expression somber but resolute. "My friends," he began, "I have made a grave mistake. In seeking joy for myself, I have brought harm to this kingdom. The heart of light is failing, and with it, the magic that has sustained our land." His advisors exchanged uneasy glances, but no one interrupted. "I have been given a choice," he continued. "I can restore the heart, but it will come at a cost. To save our kingdom, I must relinquish my magic forever." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, his closest advisor, an elderly man named Aldrin, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice quavering, "you have given so much to this kingdom. Are you certain this is the only way?" Magnifico nodded. "I am. The balance must be restored, or the darkness will consume us all." Though his advisors protested, pleading for him to reconsider, Magnifico's resolve did not waver. He had made his decision, and though the thought of losing his magic filled him with sorrow, he knew it was the only way to save his people. Chapter 8. The Ritual of Restoration. The following evening, the palace was shrouded in an eerie stillness. Word of the king's decision had spread, and the people gathered outside the palace gates, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of lanterns. Some wept openly, while others stood in silent vigil, their hearts heavy with gratitude and grief for the king they so dearly loved. Inside the grand hall, preparations for the ritual were underway. The Heart of Light had been removed from its pedestal and placed upon an ornate altar draped in white silk. Magnifico stood before it, dressed in simple robes that contrasted starkly with his usual regal attire. The hooded stranger had returned, appearing silently, as if summoned by the gravity of the moment. She stood to the side, watching with an expression that was unreadable, her presence both comforting and foreboding. Magnifico stepped forward and placed his hands on the heart once more. Its surface was cold, and its light flickered weakly, as if it were on the verge of extinguishing entirely. "Are you ready?" the stranger asked, her voice low but steady. Magnifico nodded. "I am." She raised her hands, and the room filled with a soft, humming vibration. The air grew heavy, and the faint glow of the heart began to pulse rhythmically, synchronized with the beating of Magnifico's heart. "To restore the balance, you must return what you have taken," the stranger intoned. "Speak the words of release, and let go of the magic that binds you to the heart." Magnifico took a deep breath, his hands trembling. He closed his eyes and whispered the ancient incantation, the words flowing from him like a forgotten melody. As he spoke, a searing pain coursed through his body, as though the magic were being ripped from his very soul. The heart's glow grew brighter, the cracks along its surface slowly mending. The room was bathed in a brilliant light, and for a moment, Magnifico felt weightless, as if he were being unburdened of every sorrow he had ever carried. When the ritual was complete, the Heart of Light shone with its former brilliance, its surface flawless once more. The oppressive darkness that had lingered in the kingdom lifted, and outside the palace, the people cried out in joy as the stars above shone brighter than they had in years. Magnifico, however, collapsed to his knees, his strength drained. The hooded stranger knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It is done," she said softly. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with tears. "The magic is gone," he said, his voice barely audible. "Yes," she replied, "but the light has returned. You have saved your kingdom." Though he felt a profound loss, Magnifico also felt an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time in his life, he was no longer bound by the weight of his magic. He was free, not just from the power he had wielded, but from the loneliness it had brought. As he rose to his feet, he turned to face the heart, its glow now steady and serene. It no longer belonged to him, but he no longer resented that. It would shine for the people of Solaria, just as it always had, and that was enough. Chapter 9: A Kingdom Renewed. The days that followed the ritual were unlike anything the kingdom of Solaria had ever experienced. The sky seemed brighter, the rivers clearer, and the air carried a refreshing crispness, as if the land itself had exhaled a long-held breath of despair. The people rejoiced in the return of harmony, and the once muted colors of the kingdom burst forth with a renewed vibrancy. But amidst the celebrations, the absence of King Magnifico's magic was keenly felt. For years, the people had relied on his wishes to solve their greatest challenges, to heal their wounds, and to fulfill their dreams. Now, they would have to find those solutions within themselves. Magnifico, too, found himself adjusting to this new reality. He was no longer the king who could command the stars or bend the elements to his will. Instead, he was simply a man, walking among his people with a newfound humility. At first, they approached him hesitantly, unsure of how to interact with a king who no longer held supernatural power. But as the days turned into weeks, they began to see him in a different light, not as a distant, godlike figure, but as someone who truly understood their struggles. One day, as Magnifico strolled through the bustling marketplace, a young boy ran up to him, clutching a small, carved wooden figure. "Your Majesty," the boy said, holding out the figure with wide, eager eyes. "I made this for you. It's a statue of you, see?" Magnifico knelt down to examine the carving. It was crude but heartfelt, a small figure with a crown and a kind smile. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice warm. "Thank you." The boy beamed. "I heard what you did to save the kingdom," he said. "You gave up your magic, didn't you?" Magnifico nodded. "I did, but it was worth it to see all of you happy again." The boy tilted his head, studying the king with a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. "Doesn't it make you sad, not having magic anymore?" Magnifico paused, considering the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I've learned that there's magic in other things, like kindness and courage and people helping one another. That kind of magic doesn't come from a heart of light. It comes from us." The boy nodded, as though he understood, and ran back to his family. Magnifico watched him go, his heart lighter than it had been in a long time. As he continued through the marketplace, he noticed the changes in his people. Where once they had relied on him to grant their wishes, they now worked together to solve their problems. Farmers shared tools and knowledge. Artisans collaborated on grand projects, and families cared for one another in ways they never had before. The kingdom had not only healed, it had grown stronger. Magnifico realized that by relinquishing his magic, he had given his people something far greater, the ability to believe in themselves. Chapter 10: A Legacy of Light. Years passed, and King Magnifico's reign became known as the Age of Renewal. The stories of his sacrifices spread far and wide, told not just as legends of a wish-granting king, but as lessons of wisdom, humility, and the true meaning of leadership. The Heart of Light remained in the grand hall of the palace, now serving as a symbol of the kingdom's unity, rather than a source of power. Magnifico often visited it, not to draw from its magic, but to reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. The cracks that had once marred its surface were gone, but they remained etched in his memory, a reminder of the fragility of balance and the cost of hubris. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Magnifico stood on the palace balcony, gazing out over his kingdom. The city below was alive with light and laughter, a testament to the resilience and strength of his people. Behind him, his trusted advisor Aldrin approached, carrying a rolled parchment. "Your Majesty," Aldrin said, bowing slightly, "the architects have finalized their plans for the new library. They've dedicated it to you, in honor of your wisdom and service." Magnifico smiled. "A library, you say? That's a fine legacy. Knowledge is its own kind of magic, after all." Aldrin chuckled. "Indeed, Your Majesty, and your people have never been more eager to learn. You've inspired them to reach for heights they never thought possible." After Aldrin left, Magnifico remained on the balcony, lost in thought. His life was no longer about grand displays of magic or fulfilling impossible wishes, but in many ways, it was richer than ever before. He had come to understand that true power did not lie in what one could take or create, but in what one could inspire in others. As the stars began to twinkle above, Magnifico turned his gaze upward. For the first time in years, he felt no longing for the magic he had lost. Instead, he felt a deep, abiding peace, as though the light of the heart now lived within him. In the years that followed, Magnifico grew old, his hair turning silver and his steps slowing. But his spirit remained bright, and when the time came for him to pass the crown to a successor, he did so with confidence and pride. The new ruler, a young woman named Elara, stood before the Heart of Light on the day of her coronation, her hands resting lightly on its surface. Though it no longer held the power to grant wishes, it still glowed with a gentle warmth, a reminder of the sacrifices that had restored the kingdom. As Magnifico watched from the crowd, he felt a single tear slide down his cheek, not of sadness, but of joy. The kingdom was in good hands, and his people were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, King Magnifico's story came to an end, not with a blaze of magic or a grand farewell, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. His legacy was not in the wishes he had granted, but in the strength, kindness, and hope he had nurtured in his people. In the hearts of the people of Solaria, he would always be remembered, not just as a king, but as the man who had taught them that the greatest magic of all is the light that shines within each of us.